So, disclaimer before we start, when I get very nervous, I sort of projectile vomit, so like fourth row, none of you are safe. So, now that we got that out of the way, I'm just going to stand here just in case. So now that I set the stage, hello, my name is Stefan Lazarević. I am a junior game designer. I've been working in Ubisoft for nearly 2 years now. This is my colleague.
Yep, I'm Uroš Kurandić. Also been working for about 1.5 years now. Also a junior game designer, and yeah.
So hopefully today's goal is basically sort of, the hope is to demystify sort of what a game designer does, what do they deal with on a daily basis, and basically what sort of tool sets they use in order to sort of problem solve. So let's get into the agenda real quick. So first we're going to talk about us, basically our origin story, how we became Batman and Superman, and basically just so you guys know like where we came from, what we did, and how we got to where we are right now. So hopefully like by the end you guys are like, these guys, like I'm a shoo-in to get in. So after that we're gonna talk about what is actually game design, how does it differ, whether you're working on like a small indie project with 2 or 3 people versus in a AAA studio where you can be working with 200, 300 people. After that, we're gonna share some tips, hopefully that you guys can later immediately then utilize to hopefully sort of get you on the track to become a designer. But then, as you will see, there are a lot of designers, so you guys can pick your poison. And then lastly, of course, we're gonna have a Q&A session. So, let's get into it.
Yep, so hey everyone. To start things off, I'm gonna share my story a bit, and then after Stefan is gonna share his. So you can just see how, the struggle happens when you try to get something that you really want and you don't get it, you fail, but then you come over that and you achieve. So the story starts, I was back in high school. I was playing a lot of video games at the time. I really enjoyed playing video games, which is, I guess, something that we all share in common. And during this time, I was quite a creative child. I was a creative kid. I really wanted to have some kind of outlet to create something to show to people, but I wasn't that talented in, drawing, making something. And I was playing games. I figured, why not try to make some kind of prototype, something that I can show to people. They might like it. I made something. I'm proud of it. Win-win, right? So during this time, I watched YouTube videos. That's all I did, basically. What do I do? How do I make a game? How can I make something that other people are going to enjoy, play, experience, maybe remember the experience? And I came across Unity. I'm guessing a lot of you heard about Unity, right? Yeah. So next to Unity, there's Unreal Engine. So good game engines for prototyping, making something. Yep. Can you not hear me? I don't think the mic's work at all.
So just speak louder.
I'll speak a bit louder. Is this good? Yeah, okay. Cool, yeah, so continuing on, Unity. Back at the time, there weren't a lot of resources and documentation online available for it. That was back, I think it was Unity 3D, and now it's like Unity 5 point something, so it went a long way. So, yeah, I spent a lot of my time reading through the Unity courses on their official website, or what there was, and there were a lot of YouTube channels that helped me along the road. And then I basically started making something Unity. I remember first downloading it, looking at it, and I was like, what is this? Like, I didn't know nothing at all about it. And then as time goes by, you learn new things, you see what you actually need to know in order to make a prototype for yourself. Of course, if you want to do everything from scratch, but let's face it, if you're going to start doing something, you're probably going to use assets, you're probably going to download some things and then use that. But that's basically how it went as well. But it was a good stepping stone, and the learning curve wasn't that big for Unity, so I managed to do some things. So after this, I finished high school. I was pretty, confident in my basic knowledge of Unity and how to make something. So I joined MEF faculty. It's Management, Economy, and Finances. I did the IT route. I did it for a couple years, and in this time, I was still playing games. I was still programming. I was still, learning to 3D model, to animate, basically all of the things that you need to know if you, want to do game development. So, in this time as well, I applied to Ubisoft. So I never had a real prior job before this. Ubisoft was my, first shot. And then once I applied, I basically said, why not? I shot my shot, and I missed. I didn't get in. I was devastated. Like, how can a kid fresh from high school not get into Ubisoft? I mean, so I kept doing what I loved. I didn't, back down. I decided to keep doing it since, I'm going to play games anyway, so why not just continue doing what I did? But a big motivational thing for me back then, if I didn't have this, I probably wouldn't even try to apply to Ubisoft or do game development or nothing like that. Because in this time, since I was so confident in my game development skills, I made a little YouTube channel where basically I did tutorials on Unity. Basically, it was really basic things. As I mentioned before, you don't really have a lot of resources, and the documentation wasn't very clear, especially for people who are just starting out. So I decided to make a channel where me as a beginner would teach, well, a bit above a beginner, but I would teach beginners the way I wanted somebody to teach me when I started. So what I did, basically made these videos. They weren't really clickbaity, so don't worry. I really went into the nitty and gritty of things. I explained coding, I explained programming, and it actually, got some views, it got some attention, and it got some engagement, which ultimately led, to comments, people thanking, thank you for this, thank you for that, you helped me, oh my God, your lifesaver, which really, motivated me to keep doing what I did. So what I want you to take from this, it's very important to, after failing something, it's very important to find out one thing that's going to keep motivating you to do that thing, to keep doing it even though you're failing. So amongst the people that interacted with me, I got a notification, an email from somebody asking, hey, I have a little indie project, a little game I'm working on. I'd like you to, come over and help me. Hop on the Discord and let's chat. I was like, okay, I was like, I don't know, 16, 17 at the time. I don't remember, to be honest. But first time I got into the Discord, I was, expecting some kind of group of people, who know what they're doing. They just need help with this or that. Turns out it's a bunch of kids in the Discord. Like, okay, well, it's an experience, I guess. We downloaded, I think it was like a Unity collab thing where multiple people can work on the project at the same time. And even though it was a bunch of kids, they were all really passionate about what they're doing. They really wanted to make this game. They didn't know the cost of the game or what it actually takes to make a game, which neither I did at the time, but we were living the dream, I guess. We were prototyping, coding, modeling. We split the work, I guess, onto people who know what they're doing, and so we kind of found, ground on how we can separate the work and do what we want. But eventually that flopped, and yeah, it was bad. But it was a good experience since all those kids were around the world. It was international, so I had that first experience of talking to people outside the country on a different continent, and it was quite fun. And that's really important to game design since you're going to be communicating a lot of the time, and for you to know how to communicate with people outside and different people, it's a very important skill. So it was a really good experience, even though we didn't have any type of working or good prototype after that. And yeah, basically after that, I got out of the college, and one morning, literally, I woke up to a phone call. What is it? It's like 9 a.m. I'm still sleeping. Like, what else? I wake up and it's, hey, this and this. So from Ubisoft, we have an open game design spot. You were a good candidate last time. Would you, like to have a chat with us? And yeah, that's basically how I'm here. But it was great. But it just shows how, if I didn't have that thing, I wouldn't keep doing game dev. I probably wouldn't, answer to the call or decline. But I kept doing it, and yeah, I eventually did it. So enough of me, enough of my story. I'm sorry, I don't want to bore you too much, but let's move on to my colleague here. To another story.
You think you had enough? Well. So, I might as well start from the beginning. So,
both of my parents are from Serbia. I was born in Washington, D.C. in the United States. Lived there for 4 years. After that, 2 years in Athens. Then I came here, here in Belgrade, and then I finished middle school and high school there. So that's my Belgrade High School. Lovely piece of architecture. And then basically, I was always a fan of games. Like, you know how you say you need like 10,000 hours to, become a master at something? Well, that was like a Tuesday for me. It's like I spent so much time just like playing games during high school that I did really, really like love playing games, but I never really considered it like an actual like profession. Like, oh, I'm gonna do this as like career-wise for the rest of my life. So finished high school, then I started thinking like what I can possibly do. I like making stuff, so how about we go for like engineering? So started like searching around, found out that you can do a program called the 3-2 program, which is 3 years of physics, 2 years of engineering, and at the end of the 5 years you get 2 degrees. So I was like, 2 degrees, oh, that's better than 1. So might as well just go for that. Come junior year, so that's my college, Ithaca College. So after the 3 years, I was like, you know what? Maybe physics isn't my calling. I do like physics, but whether or not I want to just like make it, again, something that I'm doing for the rest of my life, didn't really sit well with me. So come senior year, I was there in the library with one of my roommates, and then he started talking about a game that he was quote unquote making, because he was a screenwriting major, and he's like, okay, I need to sort of develop a plot, develop the marketing behind the game, and just basically everything that goes behind that. So I was like, wait a minute, I'm a self-proclaimed expert. Might as well just sort of, engage with this conversation. So I started talking to him, and then we just ended up talking for 2 or 3 hours. And then I realized that the simple conversation that I had with him about just stupidity just sparked something in me that I didn't really feel physics like did it for me. So after I was like, screw the 3-2 program, I'm just going to finish physics. And then I'm going to sort of go into the breach. Disclaimer, I did not work on this game. But I think it's a good metaphor. Because you don't really know. Like, I was like, okay, I'm doing physics. I've done physics. I love playing games, but I don't really have all of the, I don't really know what I need to do in order to sort of, get into the industry. So basically, I just started like feeling around the dark. I was like, well, since I'm a physicist, I sort of know programming, or I know the basics of it at least. So I'm going to start dabbling in that, basically dabbling in anything that's going to keep my motivation going in order for me to sort of get that sort of hard skill that I thought was going to be very useful. So basically, the plan was first to get a job somewhere in the States. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit, and then everything that I had going on there basically dropped in the water. And then my dad was like, you're wasting too much money, how about you just come back? I was like, fair enough. And then I found out that Ubisoft has a studio in Belgrade. So I was like, wait a minute, this is perfect. So I applied for a QA position at first, because I was like, literally, I'm going to be a janitor. I don't even care. Just let me in. Like, I'll do anything. So I applied for actually, I apologize. It was I applied for a programmer role. So I did programming, and of course, because I'm not actually a programmer, of course my skill set wasn't on the level. And then they were like, oh, you suck. You don't. You're not good enough to be a programmer. So I'm like, yeah, fair enough. I kind of knew that already. Do you have any other positions that I can possibly apply for? And then they were like, yes, we have a QA position. And I was like, perfect. So went to that, basically did some sort of testing, did an interview, and I was like, dude, I am nailing this. This is going so well. I'm like literally like I am just acing this. 2 weeks later, I get the call, and they were like, you didn't get it. I was like, my God. So, as you can imagine, I was, again, pretty devastated. So I was like, oh, what do I do now? Because it's like, I want to do AAA gaming. Ubisoft Belgrade is the only studio, or I figured out that there's another studio, but the only studio that I knew of that did AAA gaming. So I was like, well, might as well just sort of keep doing what I'm doing, and hopefully eventually opportunity will line up. So 2 or 3 weeks later, I scheduled a call with the HR person. Basically, I wanted to ask, like, okay, where did I go wrong? So basically, so I know I don't make the same mistake in a future interview. And then I get the call. I started talking to him, asked him what went wrong, and they were like, oh, no, nothing went wrong. We just thought that maybe you would like to, you know, apply to apply for a designer position. And I was like, okay, so do I need to like do like a pseudonym or something like Mr. Jones, because, you know, 3 times around? Like, no. We're like, you just like come over here, do the interview, do the testing, and then we'll see what happens. So went on, did that, and as you can imagine, me being in front of you here, got the job. So failed 2 times, and then the 3rd time, managed to get lucky. Well, it was big. You always need a little bit of luck, but you definitely have to put yourself in a position to be able to sort of show like what you're made out of. And it's like this is my skill set, you're confident about it, and yeah, sooner or later, like if you don't get the job, there can be like, it can be something about like you, it can be something about the studio, like for some reason they are looking for something specific and you're not really, you know, fulfilling their sort of needs, and then you're like, okay, yeah, wasn't my time, brush it off the shoulder, there you go, soldier, and then you move on. But yeah, so that was us, how we sort of got there. Now we're just going to talk a little bit, you know, about what a designer does, or actually what is the difference between, again, working in a indie studio versus a AAA studio. So I'm going to hand it over to my dear colleague.
Thank you. Yep. So moving on from the very emotional stories we had. So what is game design?
Good question.
It's a good question, yeah. Does anybody know the answer to the question?
No wrong answers.
Yep.
It's probably like making the rules and figuring out what sort of
That's good.
things you need to do to make the game work and you play it.
That's a good thing.
It's more like group
That's a good job.
chess.
Yep. Correct. That's a good answer.
What's the answer?
Is there anybody? Wait. Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit. Does anybody else want to add something to that? You don't hear anything?
You want to say it louder?
You want to
You're
know?
okay with that?
Yeah, basically said it's like making the rules and figuring out what you need to do to make the game work. So you have a concept art and you need to make it playable.
So you have some rules.
Yeah. Anybody want to add on top of that, or you guys think that was a good enough answer?
I mean, it's not just like establishing the rules, it's also about thinking about, like, as we all talked about, like narrative, talking about the concept art, talking
Yep.
about the goals in the game, talking about maybe the level design. I mean, it's a bunch of things all together. It's not just, you know, one definition, but it's everything that goes into game design. And it's I think it's a very difficult but very endurable, I'm assuming, role. And yeah.
That's a great answer. Thank you for that. So let's put it in simple terms. Whenever I get asked, for example, I tell people I work as a game designer. Steffi here as well. He tells people he works as a game designer. People say, "Oh, you just sit around all day playing video games. That's a great job. I want that job. How can I do that?" I'd love for it to be like that, but it's unfortunately not like that. It is a big part of it. You're having fun. You're doing what you love, but it's not all that. So to put it in simple terms, how I tell people what it is when they ask me, you have your player, and you have your end goal, and you have the journey or the destination from the beginning of the game to that end goal. How both of you said it. Totally correct. So what game design is making this goal over here as enjoyable as memorable and creating an intended experience that you want the player to have when they're playing your game. So that's the fun part, but it's also the tricky part, because with this comes a lot of difficult problem solving, a lot of choices that you have to make, a lot of tools that you have to introduce to the player, and ways of communicating those tools to the player so the player doesn't get bored. You have to communicate to the player in order for them to find purpose on why are they even playing your game, why are they trying to go from the beginning to the end spot like you told them. And this is all done through numerous things in game design, like level design, all of the branches of game development. This is all done through that. So games are vastly different, and there are no really set guidelines that you can use for every game or pillars, since, I mean, the same guidelines aren't going to go for an MMORPG and for a tactical first-person shooter, a competitive one. It's not going to be the same. So you can't really set some rules and guidelines that are going to work for everything. It's more of an experience thing. So what do you think good game design is, or bad game design? Have you ever played a game and said, wow, that's good, I like that, it provides an experience that I enjoy, or oh, this could have been done better, I would have done this like this, or why didn't they do it like this? Does anybody know an example or a game? Yep.
For example, good game design is based on the game not explicitly telling you what the end goal is, but expecting you to achieve that end goal through level design, story. For example, I'm playing currently Elden Ring.
Elden Ring.
Oh, I love that.
He's a fanatic for Elden Ring. He loves it.
The game doesn't tell you anything,
Yeah.
but you manage to complete it.
Yeah. And
I think that is a good example.
Yeah.
of good game design.
yep.
Although there is also a double-edged sword to that, because I talked to a fellow, to a colleague who's also a designer, and then because the game doesn't tell you anything, you can very easily miss stuff. So it's like, you know that part where you first met like Melina, and then you can like sort of get the rules. He missed that part. He did the Stormvale Castle. He beat Godric and what's the other dude? All without just like never knowing that you can upgrade yourself. So it is funny, but it is sort of like a take and give sort of design choice. Always when you make one.
Yeah. You wanted to add something?
Okay, so I wanted to say about my experience. So I played Hades, you probably know. So
Yep.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this game is so like stupid. You die and you go all over again. And I was like, okay, this is super good game design, because this game is so fun to play like in every run that you like need to constantly play it. And I was like playing it 2 days straight without sleeping.
Yeah.
It was like fun. I think fun is a core word.
Yeah.
So it needs to be fun before everything.
It has that replayability value, because you want to get better, and then when each time you die, yeah.
The game can
of
tell
course.
you need to do this and this, but if it's not fun, I mean,
Yep. That's a great example. Does anybody else have one?
Good game design, bad game design.
I know one example of a good design is a really funny game. It's called Celeste.
Celeste,
yeah,
yep.
You're climbing the mountain.
Yep.
There's like some girl that wants to overcome her anxieties or something.
Mm-hmm.
You just climb a mountain and it just gets harder and harder, and you get like side quests and you help people on the way. It's very well made because you don't just do stuff on the way and then you realize, oh, I'm at the top of the mountain. I did what I came for here, and I overcame everything else.
Yeah, and that's because you expected, you expected that, and that's basically what the point is from this. So, since games are vastly different, it's hard to define rules and guidelines to them, but you can go with this principle. So, good game design must fit the intended experience and fulfill player expectations. Now, why does it have to fulfill player expectations? Because if you have something that a player experience and it's not like they expected it to be, they're not going to have fun. They're going to think, this is not good. This is not what I wanted. Let's move on to something else. So you have to have a good experience and you have to fulfill the expectations. So moving on now, let's talk a bit. I'm guessing that all of you are more interested in this. Like, what are the things that a game designer actually does? Like tasks, day-to-day things that we do. So let me show you some things. So these are the things that, again, some of the things that a game designer can do. Now, let's go over these. Documenting. So what do you think, how that looks? How does it look when a game designer starts documenting things? Why do we document things?
Because it's easier to write it down and keep things in your head.
Of course, absolutely. Yes?
You need to have a game design document.
Yep,
You want to share your
Yeah,
thoughts with others.
exactly.
How are other people going to know? Unless
How are they
you're
gonna
mine.
know? Yeah.
So it's-
How are they gonna know?
You don't have superpowers yet.
So you document things, you document your features, your processes, the systems, even meetings, presentations, you document, so it's easier for you to find it later, and it's easier for you to share things later. You play test. Now I'm guessing y'all know why we play test. Why do we play test?
Searching for bugs.
Probably should have hit that before, but but yeah, we play test. But yeah, we play test, we search for bugs and ways to improve our design. It doesn't necessarily have to be, searching for bugs, but we search to see why does the prototype that's made fit with our game design. Does it function the way we intended it to? Does it function the way we designed it? And ultimately, does it provide the intended experience that we wanted it to provide? Balancing. How many games have you played where you play a game, you're like, oh my God, this ultimate is totally not balanced. Awful,
Terrible.
right? Yeah, so that's what balancing is for. Like all the features, they have so many variables from the nitpickiest things to like big things that are tied to other things, and you have to balance them out so everything feels good and nice, and no people are complaining on Reddit when you release the game. So you really have to watch out for that. Innovating.
Sorry.
Yep.
Does anyone play Overwatch? So, have you played it like from the beginning, or was? So, say that to my face. But okay, yeah. So, if you played from the beginning, you know that there were different metas throughout the sort of season. And what was your favorite? And what was your least favorite? Bastion meta. Bang meta. Yeah, for me it was double shield, but as you can see, there's like with Overwatch you have a set roster, heroes, and again it's 6v6 team-based game, and then of course you gotta make it fun. You can't have it like one certain team composition be dominant versus other compositions, because then that's sort of just like dumbs down in the game. You think once you're like playing against it, you're just not having fun. So it's really important that you keep the variety and then you keep make sort of like everything viable. Of course, it's much harder, easier said than done, but it's like an everlasting struggle. You're never really done balancing the game.
Yep. So innovating, creating new innovative experiences for features and systems. Now these innovating things have to be, new, something unique, something that's, thoughtful, something worthwhile, and something the player is going to remember. But they also have to be a bit familiar to the player there. Or if they're completely new, they have to be communicated to the player very well so they understand this new innovative concept that you created. So it's very important here, what I said in the beginning, that you have to communicate these new things, especially if they're unorthodox and unfamiliar. You have to communicate them in a way that the player is going to understand. So brainstorming, now either solo or with other members of the team. Now, what do you think is better? Is it better to brainstorm solo or together? It depends? Is that what you said? Or what does it depend on?
No, I think it's better together because you can come up with something and get instant feedback or some additional input on that. So build with each other.
Cool.
Awesome. Because
Someone can add to things that you might have missed and vice versa.
Yep.
yep.
Anyone else? Yep.
I maybe say solo,
Solo?
but in a way where you brainstorm something that is not half-assed idea, but it's actual idea, and then you come to more members and present them, and after that everyone builds on top of each other, not just building from scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
in a team. Which is
So it would be like, so you're saying like, it would be better in the beginning, sort of to do a solo, but then,
of idea to be solo, for idea to a bit grow before you just say.
Yeah, and then you share it, yeah.
But after that, come to your party members and try to build on that. When everyone has a solo idea.
Yep. Anybody else want to add to that? No? Okay, so brainstorming, all of you are right. You have to do both. So yeah, as you said, at the start, you can brainstorm the idea, you know, form out some pillars, some basics,
Give it
and
some
then
legs.
give it some legs, wheels, whatever, however you want to roll with it. But it's most important to, you know, talk to other members of your team, to brainstorm with them together, as other members of your team, when you're brainstorming with, I don't know, programmers, art, whoever, they might give you some insight that you wouldn't particularly notice yourself. So from the get-go when you're brainstorming, they might give you good ideas that you haven't thought because you're not thinking from their perspective, which is something as a game designer that once you get, you know, you do it, you have some experience with it, you start thinking in a way that other genres think. So how art thinks, how programmers think, although you're not art, you're not a programmer, you can't always come to the conclusions that they're going to come to, so it's very important to talk to them as well while you're fleshing out the ideas, while you're, you know, working on the design to identify any possible roadblocks or any possible ways of achieving something better, which is another thing that game design is particularly connected to since we talk to everybody. So yeah, prototyping. So prototyping functionality or a system in engine. This we do because sometimes a paper design, even though you went through it with art, with programmers, with UX, with technical, with whoever, it might look good, you all might agree on something, and then you put it inside a engine, you test it out, it doesn't work, it's not good. So we have to prototype to learn how we can improve and see it actually how it holds up. Feedback, so providing and receiving feedback. A part you mentioned it in the brainstorming, so I'm going to go over that, but yep, feedback is very important as a game designer. You get it, you receive it at a daily basis, after every design document, after every meeting, and it's very important to hold that feedback and work onto it. So you get something, you do it, and you remember that for future reference as well. And research. Why do you think we research? What do we research as game designers? Cool. Definitely.
Yeah.
We see other games, we see why do they do this well, how does it work from them, how we can do it for our project if it's similar, how we can take on it, how we can improve it. And another really good reason why we do research is when you're presenting something to somebody, either being a director, a lead, whoever, if you have research that you've done, you have clear things to say, okay, this is going to work because there it worked. Or this is not going to work because it doesn't work here. You have references to show them why it does or does not work, which speeds up the process and kind of, you know, gives you the upper edge when you're presenting. So now, ultimately, what a game designer does, it really depends. And it depends on factors. So factors that influence the type of work a game designer will be doing is the size of the studio. So yesterday, I'm guessing most of you were here. So a small mobile game isn't going to require the same amount of work or the same amount of people as a big AAA company sized project is going to require. So a small project might require only one game designer that does everything generally, and a big one is going to have more specific roles, which I'll get into after this slide. So depends on the type of the game and on the structure of the teams inside the studio. So depending on where you work, the design role might be a very general position or a, whoops, what happened?
We'll see.
Technical difficulties. Probaj da refreshuješ samo.
Ti možda nastaviš da pričaš.
Huh?
Ti možda nastaviš da pričaš.
Yep. Yeah, so here it is.
All according to plan.
All according to plan. Yeah, so where was I at? Hello. Yeah, but as I was saying, so the size and the amount of work a game designer does solely depends on, you know, those factors: the size of the studio, how they structured their teams, and the project you're working on. So now you're going to see. Let me just skip forward. Oh, it's low. I can't speak. I have to show you the slide so you understand. Yep, that's good. Cool, so it depends. We went over this. And now a small mobile project might only have one game designer who handles every aspect of design. It might have a level designer who works on the world, the scenery, the levels. So this is when it's, you know, a bit more complex and when it requires some type of level design, because the level design is quite important in getting the player from the beginning of the game to the journey or to the end of the game. So level design here helps out, so that's why they have a specific one. You know, gameplay designer, so second-to-second interactions. Can somebody, you know, does anything, what do you think about what a gameplay designer does? What's a second-to-second interaction? What?
Mechanics.
I'm sorry?
Game mechanics.
Good job. And finally, you have a AAA, you know, big structure where everybody has a specific type of work that they're doing. So you have a technical designer. Does anybody know what a technical designer is? No, I mean, it can help bridge between design and code, but what does that mean?
Get someone with a sword that uses HP.
Close, but.
Just knowing how to bring something to life.
I'm sorry, what?
Just knowing how to bring something to life, to actually make it work.
That's a good guess. Getting close.
Sorry?
Okay.
Maybe it's about, because you can imagine a lot of things that can happen in a game, but it's a question of whether you can program them as well. Like it has to be multiple.
Yeah.
You're the closest one so far. Anybody else want to add? So a technical designer is a bridge between design and code, because a technical designer has to have very good problem-solving skills, and they have to know a bit of code in order for them to spot any potential roadblocks that might happen that the designer or the programmers don't know. So when implementing a system, some technicality-wise things won't really work, and that's what a technical designer does. He sees those things, he knows why it doesn't work, because he's the bridge between design and code. He knows both ends. He can get them together and see, okay, this is not going to work because of that. So some of the technical things. A narrative designer, y'all know what this is. So the narrative designer, lore, story, they make experiences that we remember, they make characters that we immerse in, and they make worlds that we want to live in. A UX designer, do you know what a UX designer is?
Making sure that the player experiences the game the right way, the way other designers.
Okay, any other?
Between a UX designer and a game designer.
I'm sorry, what?
What is the difference between a UX designer and a game designer?
So a UX designer, he goes more into depth of player psychology. He understands how the player works, what the player does, what's the player's everyday life when they sit down, you know, to play the game. What are some of the things that are a hassle to the player? What are some of the things that cause friction when a player is trying to achieve something? And he is there to help us out by showing us those things, and then we can iterate the design upon that. So that's what a UX designer is. Basically, yeah, user experience and playability, as you said. And a systems designer, which is a really quite a dependent role. So a system designer can be anything from like he designs the combat system, so some kind of concept that is quite complex. So progression, combat, for example, vehicle systems. So big systems like that. Then he's only, specifically doing them, and he's working on them, trying to make them as fun and as playable as possible. Now, moving on, I'm gonna pass it to I've been talking for a while. I need to catch a wind, so
Thank you, sir.
take away.
All right, so the core look of a designer. Basically, what a designer is going to be dealing day to day and also just like throughout the entire project. So the frequency of how you, of what stages you're doing will depend during the pipeline or the production. So it's like you're going to be doing more of one thing during pre-production versus production versus live. So let's get into it. So first thing, of course, first thing you gotta do is document. As long as it's in your head, it's not real. So you gotta write it down so it's tangible for other people and also for you. So we can run with an example. Let's say, I don't know, let's say a feature that we want to design. It can be anything. It can be guns. It can be vehicles. Whatever. Does anybody want to just throw one out there? Raccoons. Okay, yeah, I like that.
Oddly specific.
First thing that came to mind.
All right, so raccoons. So let's say it's just gonna be a game about raccoons and the life of a raccoon. So what are raccoons? Okay, dumpster diving as a raccoon. Yeah, and then you got to go to like different sort of like areas in the city, and you got to get to the trash, but then you also have some sort of obstacles that sort of stop you from
Get
getting.
to the golden trash can.
To the goal.
The biggest trash can in the world.
Yeah, a few Easter eggs. Yeah,
Yeah, it's also effective, yeah.
that's good. Let's run with that.
Yeah.
So you got to write all of that down. Is somebody writing this down? Because this is gold.
We already forgot it. We didn't write it down. We already forgot it.
Yeah. So first thing, document. Write it down somewhere. Next thing is you gotta communicate. So far, the biggest sort of issue that I have so far working, it's just like the nature of working with people, is you gotta get everyone on the same page. And like sometimes it happens, like some people just like sort of run off and sort of do stuff, and then you sort of get out of sync there.
Yeah.
It's important always to keep communicating, keep talking, to make sure that you're like, oh, this is what I'm doing, this is the sort of development that I have, what are you doing? Let's say you're talking to an artist or like a programmer. So again, it's very important that you're just constantly in the loop with people and just like talking to them. So that's sort of like the first part of being a designer. So documenting, communicating with people, getting feedback, incorporating that feedback, talking to people again. So we've already got a mini loop going on here. Next is implementation. So once you have something that you're comfortable with, like of course, like the first time you do anything or implement something, it's never gonna be how you expect it to be. There's always going to be something that goes wrong. So, but that's why you implement. That's why you prototype. So you can find all these sort of like friction areas that you are sort of going to identify as either a big problem or like a small problem that you can sort of like overcome.
Yep.
So after you sort of implement, after you sort of see for the first time what do you think works, what doesn't work, then go to iteration. And now again, and this is basically it. So you put something in, you see why it doesn't work, you go back, you document the changes, you iterate on them, and then just again, you communicate your findings. So communicate, implement, see why it doesn't work, make it better, iterate on everything, which means, on the very prototype and on the documentation, and then you just keep doing it. And that's pretty much it. So, and of course there's going to be a lot of nuances doing this day to day, but this is pretty much like a rough overview of what you're going to be doing as a designer, the whole sort of like pipeline of the process. Now, this is I'm gonna give you a little bit of insight how we do things in Ubisoft in terms of documentation and just the design pipeline. So, first thing you do is a high-level design. So a high-level design is a one-pager document. You're just saying the most rudimentary stuff about your feature. This is pretty much just to set the expectation of the reader, of one like your colleague, so basically they know like what the feature entails. So if we were to say, go back to our like raccoon game, we would write down, okay, this is you're playing as a raccoon, and the objective of each mission is to get to the golden dumpster. And then also very important that you do in this first one, in this high-level design, is you put you define your pillars. Anybody know what a pillar is?
What's a pillar?
Some rules that the game can stand on. Some core principles that the game.
I'm sorry.
Some core principles that the game can stand on.
Yeah, exactly. So to elaborate just on it a little bit, those are basically your goals. Something that you always fall back on. And it's very useful because once you sort of define goals, and it's like as development sort of continues, things get a little bit crazy. And people start throwing out like crazy ideas. A lot of them are good, but if they do not support the main pillars that you have defined in the beginning, then you can very easily lose focus throughout the developmental pipeline. So defining pillars is extremely important to keep your game focused. So high-level design, one-pager, nothing, just like define like the basic like components, just like very, very basic. Next one is feature presentation. And of course you gotta get each of these approved either with your lead or your director. So after you do the high-level design, and then everybody's like, okay, this makes sense. Well, of course, it never makes sense in the beginning. You always iterate. Then, once you're happy with it, you go and do the feature presentation. And that is just basically sort of me verbally sort of pitching it to you like what the feature is about. So that's basically, usually it takes the form of a PowerPoint presentation because that's the easiest way to sort of like use it as a visual aid to help you while you sort of explain what your feature does. And again, you run it by directors. They usually want to get everyone, like in this part of the process, you want to get everyone that is a stakeholder in your project in a group call in order to pitch it. So once you do that, of course you get feedback, you iterate on that feedback, and you keep iterating. And then pretty much after you settle and we get the green light on the feature presentation, then you start writing the detailed design. Detailed design, you leave nothing out. It's like literally like you press forward to walk, press right to turn, press X to sit down. And it's basically nothing gets left out. Thank you.
I'm here to grab you if you fall.
So you leave nothing out. And this is basically, you make a robust document. And Uroš touched on this before, but as a designer, you're not going to communicate the same way you do with a programmer versus an artist, versus a narrative designer, versus a UX person, because all of them don't need to know the same details. But once you have a detail, like you have your master document, you sort of pull out what you need, and then of course you communicate to the person and tell them what they need to know in order to solve the problem.
Exactly.
And then lastly, you have feature sign-off. This is more of a formality. This doesn't really happen until the very end of the project. And then once this sort of stage gate gets done, that basically means that the feature is done. So no other work is going to get put into the feature. So yeah, so that was pretty much it, how we do it in Ubisoft. Lastly, I would like to sort of share some sort of tips, basically, hopefully to sort of like help you out on what else you can do
in order to sort of continue on your journey, and then also hopefully some sort of like a creative sort of output. So it's going to be 2 and 2. You'll see what I mean. So first thing, most important, if you want to get into the industry, the thing that's going to matter most to people when they're like looking at your resume and stuff like that is what you have done. And it can be anything. Like if you,
last name.
sorry. What you have done. And then this can be anything. This can be like if you are a 3D environment artist, then you sort of make you make a biome. It would score some huge brownie points. Let's say you go, like you have an interview at Ubisoft and you're a 3D environmental artist, and then you're like, I am going to sort of make a level in like Assassin's Creed in like Imperial Japan. And then you sort of make, make the building, you sort of think about what the mechanics are behind it, so everything has to be climbable, everything has to be sort of like interactive, and basically you just do something. And again, that is a huge plus. That is something that everybody's gonna like look at and be like, yes, that's good. That's what we need. So,
yeah, just having things to show. Like, if you remember at the beginning when we spoke about the things we did, we both had things that we did and we were able to show it. And whatever job you're applying for, it's going to be much more helpful if you have something to show, so people know that you've done it and you have. Even if you weren't like, if you didn't have a job doing those things, you did it in your free time. You did it because you love to do it. You did it because you're proud of it. You show it. They see it. They know the skills that you have because you made that. And you're proud of it, and it boosts your, just be confident. Be confident in the things you do and in the things you love, and if you show it, if you made it, it's gonna give you a lot of points in getting that job that you want. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so, it's better, but it should be a finished product. And it's like, because you can do a lot of stuff like start it but not finish it. And it's really important that it's like a finished product and you're like, I'm done with this. Even if it may not be the greatest, like as long as it's sort of like you see the whole picture, that is what's most important.
A question. Would you count a decent demo as a finished product, a demo that could develop?
A polished, like fleshed out demo, couple of minutes?
Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, it's better to come with the demo than not come with anything. So, it definitely gives you points. Now, depending on how good the demo is, might give you more, might give you less, but you still made it, it's still yours, you're showing it, yeah.
Next one, basically what you're doing right now, right? So, the best way to sort of, get information from the industry is to talk with the people that are in it. Sort of, talk to them, see what their journey was like, see what they're doing now. Because often enough, they will have some insight that will be helpful to you. So keep going to events, keep talking to people. Just talk. People like to talk about themselves most of all. So just tell like, what do you do? How'd you get there? And then you'll see. You won't even have to do much talking. Next is more of a sort of a creative thing, and it's embrace constraint. And because constraint gives you perspective on a certain feature. So the global game jam, it only has one constraint, which is the theme, and it doesn't give you anything else. And already with that one constraint, you can see that no game is the same, and so many just like different like ideas are like flowing around. Just because you have sort of to focus and like shift your perspective around something, it's much easier to sort of design with constraints in mind rather than like free flow. Rather like if you like go to a game jam and they were like, all right, now make a game, and you're like, okay, how, what? So so basically, embrace constraint. It's there to sort of shift your perspective, think about things differently, and that's why it's also important, what Uroš mentioned, when you're talking to other people, everybody has a different perspective.
Yep.
So most of the time, they're probably going to see something or maybe give you some insight that you haven't really thought about before. So, embrace constraint. And then lastly, play critically. It took me, I didn't really even do this until I sort of like became a developer. Like I would also just like sort of like, you know, turn off my brain and sort of just enjoy the game. But, you know, play something and then think about it. Think about what they do well, what they do bad, and how you would improve on it. So that's sort of, and then that will sort of like put you in the mindset of just like how a developer does, how a developer thinks. So I think that's
Yep.
pretty much it. Thank
That
you, guys.
concludes us.